Hey everyone, welcome to Google I/O 2021 Ask Me Anything. This is all about AI in the cloud. In today's session, we're going to hear questions from all of you, and I'm joined by some special guests here in our developer relations team. My name is Karl Weinmeister. I am a developer advocate here at Google. My area of specialty is in ML Ops, which is basically the application of DevOps to machine learning. And I'm also joined by Anu.
Hi, Karl. Yeah,
Hey.
thank you. I'm really excited to be here. So my name's Srivastava. Also, we're all colleagues, developer advocates for Google Cloud AI. My focus is actually on pre-trained APIs that we have that you can use to integrate into your app or service. In addition to being really excited about everything being in one home with Vertex AI, I also work on Document AI, which is AI for all of your business forms. Zach, do you want to go next?
Thanks, Anu. I'm Zach. I'm also a developer advocate. I happen to be based in London, and I specialize in APIs, AutoMLs, and my kind of like subspecialty is in everything to do with vision and video applications. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. I think you see that we have a real nice mix of folks from different backgrounds today, and we're also all good friends, so it'll be a great session. So let's start with the first question about Vertex AI. Some of you may have seen some of the press release, of course, and our keynote, and are wondering, what is Vertex AI, and why is the release of it important? So Anu, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, the reason why I'm really excited about everything being unified in one home is that for me, sometimes the hardest part about learning a new technology is getting started. You know, especially if you're trying to build an end-to-end system, you need to enable APIs, you need to set up authentication, you need to maybe train data in different places and bring it all together. But now it's a one-stop shop for the whole life cycle that you might have with your AI application.
It's fantastic. Zach, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I agree with Anu, and my sort of background and experience using Vertex has been really positive, especially because I used to train like quite a lot of AutoML models. That was like my go-to thing for building demos. And one thing I really like about the new UI is that it centralizes your raw data in one place, and then off of that you can create like different annotation files. So for me, building image models, I can have one raw source of the images, and then have one annotation that does image classification and one annotation that does like object detection, and it structures these in like a really intuitive way. So for me, building vision-based AutoML models, it's a really nice new sort of unified UI for the structure of annotations to the raw data.
Yeah, that's a great point. What I think is really awesome about Vertex is that it sort of brings together a lot of AI technologies into one place. Like Zach mentioned, this idea of creating what are called managed data sets. So it's the same data that you can use if you're going to create different types of vision models, let's say for classification, object detection, or whatever you're doing. But also if you're building a custom model, say you're using TensorFlow and writing, model yourself with code, you have that traceability back to that same data set. And Vertex brings all these different services together. So it's like you load your data, you build a model, then the next thing is deploying that model to an endpoint. It's all kind of walks you through a flow. So it's really intuitive and brings it all together, and allows you at different types of roles, whether you're a developer or data scientist, to kind of be able to use the tool easily. So that's Vertex. Let's go ahead and move on to our next question here. It is about AI solutions. We talked about how Vertex brings a lot of different services together. Another way to think about things is different levels of abstraction, right? So if you're building an AI solution, the question is, what are those different levels of abstraction? So, and I can start with this one. So we talked about custom models, right? That's that ability that you typically think of with data science, where you might visualize your data, write some code to train the data, build a model, take that file, deploy it to an endpoint, and then predict with it, right? So that's that sort of process. Now, AutoML has come along and allowed you to create custom models with your unique data to solve unique problems, but without having to figure out the best model for it. So that's another sort of level of abstraction. It kind of takes some of those steps of the process and does it for you. And then you also have APIs that allow you to not even bring your own data, simply leverage what Google has on the cloud. Like, let's provide an image and get some insights out of it. You know, what's in that image, or what are some of the, let's put some bounding boxes around some of the things that we find in that image. These are all things that we've trained against a large general data set so we can apply it to all kinds of problems. Finally, one of the exciting things that, Anu mentioned that she focuses on is AI solutions. And here's where we're building business-oriented solutions for things like managing documents, parsing forms, all those kind of things. We've taken the AI brain behind it and made it very easy to use. So you can work at all these different levels. So that was kind of an intro to it. Zach, anything else you want to add about the different ways you can work with Google Cloud AI?
Well, yeah, you pretty much covered it all in terms of like when I'm building stuff, I sort of come at it from like a developer standpoint. So I look at what's the simplest and quickest way for me to solve a problem. So naturally, I'll go to the APIs first. Okay, if I can solve a problem using the APIs, that's perfect. I can finish there. But then if the APIs don't quite do exactly what I want, I build a custom model with AutoML. And then if AutoML's patterns don't match what I'm doing, I do a custom model with custom training routines and things like that. So yeah, pretty much the exact same thing you said.
Yeah, it's great that, maybe you're a developer who just wants to solve a problem. How do I, get from A to B? So that's where those APIs might come in. But also, if you go all the way down, that's the path, the developers I work with normally go through. But if you are building your own custom model, you have a lot of different options right in Vertex, right? TensorFlow, PyTorch. You can really kind of do anything that you need to in one of the notebooks. So yeah, there's a lot in there.
Great. So, we have some folks that are looking at Vertex for the first time, and then we have some folks that may have some existing models, some that are new to Google Cloud, some that use it for a while. So our next question is about getting started with Vertex AI. So let's start with the new. Just, what are your thoughts on how to get started from wherever your starting point might be?
Yeah. So one of our colleagues, Sarah, she's published a number of code labs that will not only like illustrate what you can do, it'll give you step-by-step instructions, whether you want to train a model using TensorFlow. We actually have some tech demos that on the demos website at IO that will show you, high level what you can do. But then these code labs give you step-by-step instructions on setting up for yourself. Also GCP credit if you might not already be a GCP user to test all of these things out. So I definitely suggest starting there.
Fantastic. Zach, one of my favorite tutorials is the one that you've built with Dale on our team around, analyzing your tennis serve. It's a lab that I've run through several times. What are your thoughts on just how to get started, practicing using AI on Google Cloud? What are your thoughts?
Getting started, I always like one of my favorite APIs is the video intelligence API, and that's the same API we used in that demo to do pose recognition. And the great thing about that is like if you're just getting started, and if you look into ML courses, it can be quite intimidating. But then if you look into using like these APIs, it's a pre-trained model. So especially things like the video intelligence API, it's my favorite one because it has so many rich features in there. And what's really cool about these features is you just feed it a video and it will tell you some really incredible things, like if there's any people in it, if they're posing in a specific way, or there's text in the video. So if you're just getting started, it's a really sort of quick win to be had with any data you have, because naturally people have videos lying about. In fact, Dale also did a really cool project where she analyzed like archival footage that her dad had recorded. So it goes to show like people just have like videos and like unstructured data, which is what we call like videos and like text and stuff. They just have that lying around. So just using one of these APIs with the data you already have is a really cool way to kind of just like almost get motivated when you're getting into machine learning. So yeah, that's my recommendation, is get a quick win using an API.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And Zach, some of the stories that that we've built as a team are just really good ways to. You mentioned looking at some of the family photos and categorizing them. Another thing that folks have been really excited about is we did a series around taking a PDF file and turning it into an audiobook, and kind of by trying to solve that problem, getting familiar with using some of our speech APIs and things like that. So I think it's all about, just like anything in tech, just kind of finding something that you're interested in where maybe AI can apply, and just go ahead and go for it. If you're new to Vertex, there are several sessions, of course, during I/O. Sarah Robinson is giving one that's an intro that I think will do a nice just overview of getting to know the different services, how it works. If you go to the documentation, there are several kind of like hello world style tutorials for vision or NLP or all the different types of AI that you're going to find there. So that'll get you started.
Yeah,
Okay.
my favorite one that Sarah did, I think she just did the workshop that must have just ended, but it's recorded. It's using tabular data in Vertex to make a prediction. So that's another good I/O resource you should look out for. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, so our next question, let's talk about MLOps. Okay, so the question is, it seems that Vertex AI has a lot of MLOps capabilities. Why is MLOps important to developers? And I can start with this one. In the development world, we've had some practices for a long time, right? Continuous integration, continuous development. We have ways that unit tests that we can check that what we're doing is going to work, that as we make changes to our code, it's not going to break. Now, machine learning is making mission critical decisions about things. It's classifying things, predicting things. We need that same level of rigor around the models that we build to prevent them, a disaster from happening, a bad model going into production. So MLOps is all about it. So Vertex AI has some really interesting capabilities built in. So what is called managed pipelines? And managed pipelines allows you to create a reproducible pipeline, a set of steps where you can basically hit the play button, and it will, if you code it this way, extract data from your data sources, build a model, deploy your model, maybe validate the data that you're using to make sure that maybe some of the data that you're pulling from there weren't changes into the schema or anything. And then maybe you evaluate your model and make sure that the accuracy hasn't gone down before you deploy it. Those are all the kind of things that you can do in a pipeline. Another really cool thing is called model monitoring. So, and I know Zach wrote an article about this a while back about zombie data in your models. That was very cool. Good introduction to that. You can find on Medium. And it's this idea that you build models based on data in the past, but we all know things change, right? And so that model that had really good accuracy could start to drift over time. And that's where model monitoring comes in. It's not like typical software development where it just breaks. It's, works or it doesn't. ML, there's a little more nuance where it could work, but it just starts to degrade over time, and model monitoring allows you to catch that. So these are just a couple examples of the integrated ways that you can apply DevOps principles to ML that are all part of Vertex AI. So definitely recommend checking that out. Okay, so our next question is about leveraging pre-trained models from Google. So with that one, why don't we start with Zach?
Oh yeah, so this is my bread and butter here. So I love just building things really quickly. So the great thing with pre-trained APIs, you don't need to do the most intense part of the machine learning process, which is actually building the model, getting the data set, making sure it's clean and stuff, and then training your model, and then the deployment of it. You don't need to do any of that. You can just call an API and send your data to it, and you get a response from the API. So yeah, like I said previously, favorite ones, video intelligence, and there's ones for image prediction and text prediction. And they're just really fun almost to play with, especially if you're involved in any hackathons, it goes to show how quickly you can use them. And they even have built-in demos for the Vision API right into the docs page, where you can just, what I'll usually do if someone's curious about building an image based app for machine learning is I'll say, go to the docs, drag the image that you're planning to use or an example image into the demo there and see what it returns, and just see is any of this useful? And if it is, then you should probably just use the API, and it tells you right there the web request to send to call the API. So it's very much try it. It's free to try. It's instant. So you'll find out immediately if it can be useful. And if it is, it's quick as well to just implement and use. So it's one of these things, like I said previously, it's just a really quick win if it can solve your problem. So it's like worth trying out. So yeah, I'd say look into the docs. There's usually like quick to activate demos, and yeah, just try them out.
Yeah, I love those demos that we have it in all the landing pages. So not only, video intelligence and vision, but also NLP. Maybe you're working with some text data and you want to gather sentiment. You can put some samples in there and get that back. As far as on the pre-trained side, we've had some of the basic APIs around for a while. And let's say that you're in an industry like healthcare or financial services. We're building on top of these to have even more specialized APIs that you can use. So, you might be familiar with natural language. Well, there's actually now a healthcare natural language API that you can also test out in the same way. So I'm just really excited to see, all these things growing and being even more targeted and useful to our developers.
Yeah, if there's a tool that solves your problem quickly, go for it. And these APIs allow you to just integrate, call the REST API, use the SDK. You don't have to train a model and all that very quick. So great place to get started. One other thing just to mention as far as pre-trained models is some of the models that you may have heard of coming out of Google Research are available on TensorFlow Hub. So you can leverage models that you may have heard of, BERT for natural language processing and some of the other image models. You can use those and even do things like fine tune those models where, they're large models that are trained on a general data set, but you can leverage the concepts that they've learned and kind of just adjust them for your data set. So TensorFlow Hub is a great way to kind of pull those down and leverage those models if you want to do some custom work. So let's move on to our next question. And I think this is a good follow-up to what we were talking about with Zach and the video API. So what's your favorite ML API that's underutilized by devs?
Well, I know what my favorite is. Video intelligence. It's what I think it's probably not underutilized because I think there's quite a lot of developers I've already seen who are using it for doing things like label detection, where it just gives you like searchable terms for your video, and object detection. Those are two like one of the most like mature features of the API. But what people might not be aware of is that there's actually loads and loads of new features, things around like detecting people and their poses. That's now part of the API. Things like OCRs built in and brand detection. So maybe you're building an app, you want to detect if someone's doing like product placement in it. That's just built into the API. You don't need to train your own model to do it. Again, it's one of these things like with all the other APIs, they have like a range of features and they're constantly adding new features to them. So it's just worth like, if you're working with video, look at the video intelligence API because there'll probably be some useful features. And the same goes for like image and natural language. But yeah, I think certain features of the video intelligence API are definitely like right hot off the press. So naturally, there's not going to be a lot of developers aware of them. But yeah, there's some really cool features around like person detection. So yeah, video intelligence, person detection.
Ooh, you know what? We haven't talked about chatbots yet, and that's also a big part of our platform. Also, not sure if it's underutilized, but let's talk about it now. Dialogflow and Contact Center, I think, is really helpful if you are building a chatbot or doing anything conversationally. My background, I actually worked in the chatbot space before I came to AI, and it is really hard to build, a useful, natural sounding chatbot. And so I highly recommend if that is something you're looking into, go ahead and test out Dialogflow because you can use the natural language capabilities out of the box, but you can also, augment it with maybe like your own data so it knows like special nouns to your use case. So there's a lot in there, and I think it's a really neat product to integrate with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's really cool how a lot of the AI products sort of work well with each other. There's connections like, you've worked with, chatbots where there's natural language, there's speech elements to them. Document AI, has sort of that OCR and also, text processing. So anyway, just lots of different ways to go about it. So our next question, I think is a really good one from the audience, especially if you're a developer and you're not really sure, should I apply AI to this or not? So the question is, how do you spot a problem which can be AI-ified, I like that, versus more conventional methods? And I can start off with this one, that I think that, the real difference between AI and traditional software development is that in software development, you have a set of inputs and you know what the rules are, right? You're coding it up. If this, then that, and then you come up with an output. AI is good when you don't really know what those rules should be, right? You have a set of inputs and you have a set of outputs. Like I have a bunch of pictures and I know I can label what's in those pictures, but I'm not exactly sure how I got from point A to point B. What were the rules? What were the particular pixels and colors that led to that? Or another example might be like you're doing some forecasting on the future. You're looking at the markets and you're trying to look at these trends over time. You don't know what those rules are, but that's where machine learning can come in. Maybe that there's some pattern that can be discovered. So essentially what you're doing is you're figuring out what those rules are versus traditional methods. You kind of have an approach. You know what those rules or heuristics are. So sorry if that was a little philosophical of an answer, but that's kind of my take on that. Zach or Nu, any other thoughts on when to spot a good AI problem?
I have like a kind of funny, I guess, rule of thumb. If you can do it with a SQL query and you don't actually have unknowns, it might not be the right problem, but there could be other problems in your space that you need to think about that don't actually have common paths that AI could help you. But, definitely be careful because, there is a little bit of a known in the mix. Check out explainable AI because, if you're doing something that, you have users, you want to be really careful and transparent about what you're doing with data. So that's my rule of thumb, I guess.
I think I've got a similar thing where it's like, rather than knowing like what can be AI, knowing like for sure what doesn't need to be AI is kind of as useful of a thing. Like I think there's a classic story of like how Google detects when you should have attached an attachment in a Gmail thing. People are like, oh, surely it's like you use AI for that to do like natural language classification. Like, did they say they would attach an attachment? And if it comes back like predicting they should have, then send them a message. But actually then they worked out as actually just an if statement. If they mention the word attachment, attached, people just use that. It's like, if you can solve it with an if statement, probably don't need to use AI. But then also a thing that I think is like what make things a bit simpler is that there's just so many common patterns. Like if you're working with images, that's classic. Video, classic. Large bodies of text, classic AI. All this kind of unstructured data that doesn't necessarily fit into columns in a database, then you can imagine there's something to do with AI there. And what I usually recommend to people who like ask me like, oh, how would I solve this specific problem with AI? I just ask them, oh, well, what problem that is already solved with AI that is similar to this? So someone was like, oh, how do I do this thing with like some obscure time series data? Is like, how do I solve this problem with AI? I'd be like, well, it kind of sounds like it's called like trigger word detection, which is the same thing they use when you're trying to like activate your phone's assistant. We're just detecting that one word over time. I was like, look into that. That'll probably tell you the right steps to take. So yeah, I'd recommend just exposing yourself. And a good thing is coming to this AMA is like just exposing yourself to as many different random solutions. And then you'll draw links to be like, oh, they solved something similar with AI. Maybe I can solve it with this one as well. So yeah, just get out there and see all the different demos and examples.
Good answer. So the next one I think is a good question because it's funny how we're getting questions on the questions we've already answered. So we have basically a few similar questions that I'm just going to group into one here. There was a question about where to get the step-by-step tutorials mentioned by Anu, as well as the tabular data tutorial and Zach's tutorial. So I want to mention one resource, Code Labs. codelabs.developers.google.com. You can Google that and find it. We have already several Vertex AI code labs available and a whole bunch of other awesome resources to learn, cloud AI, TensorFlow, things like that. So I was just going to check, Anu or Zach, any other thoughts on where to get tutorials, getting started, resources?
Yeah, I'm also, in addition to code labs that have the step-by-step instructions, I'm also really a huge fan of the quick starts and the code snippets that we have embedded in our documentation. Um, for several of the API methods, we'll actually sketch it out for you in several different languages. So Java, Node, Python. So you can kind of copy and paste into maybe a code sample, for the framework or service that you're already using, or maybe something that you're more familiar with. And these are all actually, we really believe in open source. So all of our code snippets are on GitHub in repos. So, if there's something that you want to contribute or, file a bug on, or, ask for help, that's how you can get help with those things.
I totally like +1 on that. Like the code snippets in the docs are a really good source. Also, if you look towards the official Google Cloud blog, we usually post around like really nice like vertical solutions that involve like the AI and ML APIs and tools, all in like usually like within an actual like story of how it's actually used to solve a real problem. So that's also a good example of seeing how they're used, and there'll also be code snippets and samples and links to GitHub repos in there.
Perfect. All right. So our next question is around doing AI in the cloud. I really like this question because it kind of brings it all together. So the question is, why would I do AI in the cloud over somewhere else? So who wants to take that question?
Oh, I like this question because I started off like learning programming using things like Arduinos, like very low level hardware devices. So I've always been like, I always like building things locally on my own computer and machine. And then when I started learning about machine learning and doing it all on my own machine, the first thing that I encountered was my poor laptop couldn't handle the amount of data and training. I'd run out of hard drive space. So like the biggest reason I'd say is the scalability of just the data set itself. And considering that like the more data you have, the better your model. It's a classic example. Having a place where you can safely upload like huge data sets to train models and not have to worry about your like local computer, like making your own room very, very warm is like a huge benefit for me. So that's my main thing is just like having a safe place where I can put huge data sets and do all the training in the cloud so that I can like use my local machine to do things, which needs to do, like playing games.
For sure. I mean, I feel like that's almost, why cloud in general, right? Like I just want to write code. I'm a developer. I don't want to have to do the ops, the, system admin sort of work. And that's, the point of cloud is to sort of offload that so you can really focus on like the problem that you're actually trying to solve.
Absolutely. Yeah. And my experience was kind of similar to Zach's. Was when I first got into data science, one of the things I would do is go to Kaggle, and it's a data science community. I was doing competitions. Like one of them was Titanic, that maybe some of you have tried. And I just remember spending hours waiting for my model to train, and then I'd make one little change and have to wait. My little desktop computer was just, buzzing, for hours, right? And these are the kind of things, if it's taking too long, you can, crank it up and have a, higher level chip, with more, GPUs or more, more RAM. You can really just solve these problems so much quicker. And then when you're done using it, and you can, turn off your notebook. But anyway, just fast, easy to use. I love it. Couldn't go back.
That's huge. And on that, the big one, another huge one for me is when I first started working at Google, I started building demos, and then I started building big demos that involved multiple people. And so like the amount of collaboration that you can achieve when things are all in the cloud, like just adding let me just add you that project. Oh, now you have access to the notebook and stuff that I could never do using a local machine, because having done data science projects with just local machines, like using GitHub, and people have different environments set up, and it saves so much hassle just being like, here's the notebook. It's got everything installed. It's already running. You don't need to install anything on your laptop. You can even access it on your phone if you want. Like that, the environment itself, having those libraries installed, I'd say is like one of the biggest reasons for me.
Oh yeah. So I didn't start coding until I was in college, and when I first started, I didn't know about all these tools. So I remember doing group projects. We would actually be emailing the code files back and forth to each other. So, thankfully tooling is out there and readily accessible.
Okay. Well, fantastic conversation. I think we're out of time, everyone. Great question from the audience. Anu, Zach, awesome being with you again. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll wrap up our session today. Have a great day.